Wham Radio is an alternative media outlet and is not regulated by any authority other than its creators.
Wham Radio and any of its affiliates are not responsible for your ignorance and due diligence. Please support the freedom of speech. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wham Radio. We have a mutiny radio. This is Anarchist coming to you from the dark side of the moon. Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about my presentation style. Usually in my main episodes of Wham Radio, I will present concepts and break them down and present them in an educational manner, whereas in my side segments with Marlboro Man, I will be doing things more for leisure or entertainment purposes. Now, I'd like to also reiterate any misconceptions about anything I say on my past shows or any shows that I have to come. Don't take what I say literally. If you have any questions, though, please comment below, like and share if possible, and I would be more than happy to answer them here on Wham Radio. Tonight, I want to talk about the topic of direct action and what it means versus what we're told what they think or what they want us to think it means. Now, the dictionary version of direct action is a noun, the use of strikes, demonstrations, or other public forms of protest rather than negotiation to achieve one's demands. So that's what they want us to think what direct action is. So getting in people's way, being obnoxious, a big problem. Now, the etymological version, or the actual version of direct action, is a bit different. Now, the word direct comes from the word, or the Latin word, dirigere, meaning to set straight. And the word action comes from the Latin word agire, which means cause or grounds. So basically, direct action means to set straight a cause or issue. Literally, that is all it means. Many people see direct action as a negative connotation in society. Just think about it a moment. How do you directly act on your environment every day? How many times do you directly act with people and places? For example, if your flowers in your garden are wilting and are in need of water, then wouldn't you just water them? That seems like the common thing to do, right? Wouldn't you see that as a form of direct action? Did you need to call a professional or representative to help you water the plant? Was a vote needed to perform the watering of the plant? Now, I want to give a quote from David Graeber. He wrote a book called Direct Action and Ethnography. He goes on to say, in quote, if one were to assemble a group of townsfolk to dig a new well anyway, in defiance of the law, then would that be direct action? But what if one were to have them blockade the mayor's house until he changed his policy? That would not be it. So, to follow up on what Graeber is saying is, direct action is standing for what you believe in by living the ways that you believe. To many, direct action is seen as an annoyance, such as protest or boycotts. Most of those so-called freedoms or privileges that we have today, we achieve through disobedience of the system or causing a scene. Everyone seems to say, look at those lazy bums over there doing absolutely nothing. Well, don't forget, it was those so-called lazy bums who picketed for women's rights. It was the same lazy bums who filled Washington, D.C. to hear Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech about his dream to have a united people of all races embrace their own heritage and those of others. A speech on tolerance. Now, Graeber also goes on to say, in quote, direct action aims to achieve our goals through our own activity rather than through the action of others. It is about people taking power for themselves. In this, it is distinguished from most other forms of political action, such as voting, lobbying, attempting to exert political pressure through industrial action or through the media. All of these activities concede our power to existing institutions which work to prevent us from acting ourselves to change the status quo. When it comes to changing the world, one does not need to vote or wait for higher powers to approve of their actions. Why should you have to wait to see the change you wish to have in your lifetime? Do it yourself. The basic principles of anarchism is self-organization, voluntary association, mutual aid, and the opposition to all forms of coercive authority. These are all essentially moral and organizational, end quote. To follow up what Graeber is saying, direct action demands responsibility. It is you, the person, who is responsible for your own actions and inactions. You are in charge and 100% responsible for your own life. Direct action is taking the middleman out of the equation. Instead of donating money to charities, give your money to the actual homeless in your community. There are so many ways to be responsible in your town and make change. Grow gardens, not lawns. Stop buying fast food and invest in cooking at home. Of course, this involves more work because you pay for the convenience and forego your free will. Now you ask me, Anne, how is this all possible? And the answer is quite simple. You didn't have to think when you made the choice in the first place. Now first, I really would like to clarify before I keep going into the topic of direct action you have to erase what your idea of anarchy is and what anarchist really is versus what you're being told what we are. Most people have the idea that all anarchists are crazy people who want to run the streets, break windows, and burn buildings down. Well, that is far from the truth. And I'm going to give you another quote from David Graeber because he does do justice when it comes to explaining a lot of these concepts. Now, in quote, Graeber goes to say, admittedly, things like this flies in the face of the popular image of anarchists as bomb-throwing crazies, opposed to all forms of organization. But if one just examines how this reputation came about, it tends to reinforce our point. The period of roughly 1875 to 1925 marked the peak of a certain phase of anarchist organizing. There were hundreds of anarchist unions, confederation, revolution leagues, and so on. While anarchism as a movement tended to be very strongly rooted in mass organizing of the industrial proletariat, anarchists also tended to draw inspiration from existing modes of practice, notably on the part of the peasants, skilled artisans, or even to some degree outlaws, hobos, vagabonds, and others who live by their wits. In other words, those who were to some degree in control of their own lives and conditions of work, who might be considered, at least to some degree, autonomous elements. One might say in Marxist terms that they were people with some experience of non-alienated production. Such people had experience of life outside of states or capitalist bureaucracy, salaries, and wage labor. They were aware of such relations were not inevitable. Quite often, they viewed them as intrinsically moral. Now, what does he really mean by this? Well, I'm going to give a good example in history of an anarchist movement that was hidden from our history books, and we are not told about this. The Ludlow Massacre is one of America's darkest moments. This is one of the first noted anarchist movements in our modern history here in the States. The mine workers of Ludlow, Colorado went on strike due to the poor working conditions of the worksite. The strike was to let the mine owner, John D. Rockefeller, know that they will not tolerate the harsh working conditions. Using direct action, the miners demonstrated their freedom and worth. Without movements like this, we would not have the unions worker that we have today. Direct action is demonstrating freedom by all means as the individual sees fit. Now I'm going to show you a small clip of the Ludlow Massacre to give you a little more history and background on the movement, but I do feel that this is something we all should know about. So here it goes.
It is 1914, the year the Great War will begin in Europe. In Ludlow, Colorado, 11,000 miners are on strike at John D. Rockefeller's coal mine. When Rockefeller evicts the strikers and their families from the company town, they move into the hills and erect a tent city. The Colorado National Guard arrives. The miners cheer, thinking that the guardsmen have come to rescue them. In fact, they are in Rockefeller's pay. The guardsmen set up their Maxim machine guns on the slopes overlooking the strikers' tents. The fiery union organizer from Toronto, Mother Jones, tries to head off the conflict, but she is arrested and thrown in jail. On the evening of April 20th, 1914, while many of the families are asleep, the National Guard opened fire on the tent city. The strikers hide in trenches to escape the bullets, but the machine gun fire is so fierce it sets the tents ablaze. When the smoke clears, 36 are dead, including 12 children. The strike is won by Rockefeller, who hires a new labor relations advisor to deal with the aftermath. Future Canadian Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King. Ludlow was the first deadly use of the machine gun in American peacetime. It will not be the last.
Now, isn't that a very important piece of information we should all pay attention to? I want to give you another thing to think about. Every time we ask the system to hear our whims and cries, we are enslaving each other by means of coercion by the system. Most people would think, well, geez, who will stop all the bad guys if there wasn't any government? Every time you make that comment, you are insinuating that you will not do anything because it's not your responsibility to help out. You are saying that you will not help. It's someone else's problem. This is called learned helplessness. You victimize the victim by being a victim yourself. You are the victim of your own cowardice. Ultimately, it is up to the individual as to how they should live their lives and directly act upon the environment. Direct action will solve your problems in life and that of others around the world. Wouldn't you like to live in a society where each individual is free to act in response to situations? Just think about that. Alright everybody, you have a good evening. This is Anarchist coming to you from the dark side of the moon, and I will see you later.